Hello there, and thank you for listening to the 98th episode of Congressional Dish. I'm your host, Jennifer Briney. And oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about. But if this is your first time listening to Congressional Dish, this show is about governing. I am that person in this country that is actually reading the bills that Congress sometimes turns into laws. Congressional Dish is listener-supported, meaning that the people who benefit from it, who learn from it, and who support it existing are the ones who pay for it voluntarily to make its production possible. You won't hear any advertisements on this show, as I refuse to kiss corporate ass. And so if you want to know what's in the laws that Congress is writing but don't want to read the bills yourself, and if you like listening to podcasts that don't depend on selling you shit for money, please contribute whatever you think this show is worth by using any of the methods available on the support page on congressionaldish.com. On the support page on congressionaldish.com, you'll find a button that links to PayPal. You can also contribute using Bitcoin. There's an Amazon search box that you can use every time you shop, and that gives Congressional Dish a commission. Or you can send physical checks to the Congressional Dish P.O. Box, which ensures that this show gets every one of your dimes. It's the honor system here. So if you get value from this show, either from the information or the entertainment or whatever, please pay for its production, whatever amount you think is fair, and help keep it free for the people who vote, but who truly can't afford to chip in. Now, for this episode, I read the USA Freedom Act, which is a bill which passed the House of Representatives in mid-May, which would replace some provisions of the Patriot Act that expired on June 1st. This bill is likely to become law. Just about everyone in Congress is saying that it will, including Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who has been by far the most vocal person against the Patriot Act provisions that just expired and the USA Freedom Act. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Let's start at the very beginning for those of you who have heard of the Patriot Act but don't really know what it is. The Patriot Act was passed in the wake of the September 11th attacks. It was crafted extremely quickly. It became law on October 26, 2001, just 45 days after the towers fell. Regular listeners to Congressional Dish will recognize that the way it was passed fits a familiar pattern. This is Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky dropping a knowledge bomb on the Senate floor about how the Patriot Act became law.
In the aftermath of 9/11, the Patriot Act was rushed to the floor, several hundred pages. Nobody read it. Didn't come out of there was one out of the committee. They didn't use that. They rushed a substitute to the floor, and no one had time to read it. But people voted because they were fearful, and people said there could be another attack, and Americans will blame me if I don't vote on this.
Now, the Patriot Act, which was clearly not carefully considered, created new law and changed a bunch of existing laws, including the Electronic Communications Privacy Act of 1986 and the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978, which was a controversial law itself because it created a court, the Fisa court, that could issue surveillance warrants in secret. Now, the FISA court was created in the late 1970s after it was discovered that President Nixon used government resources to spy on political and activist groups, which was a crime that violated the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, number 4 in the Bill of Rights. Now, just as a reminder, since most of us haven't read the Bill of Rights since like 3rd grade, the Fourth Amendment guarantees that, quote, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized, unquote. So basically, the Fourth Amendment says that if the government officials want to look at your shit, they need to get a warrant. So the FISA court was created after President Nixon illegally used the powers of the executive branch to spy on political opponents, a crime he was pardoned for by the next president. And Congress was forced then to do something to theoretically rein in the executive branch and its runaway spooks. The FISA law then set up a parallel legal system, which in theory would make sure that no American would be monitored by the government without the approval of a judge. And then to please the intelligence community, this court's proceedings would not be open to the public. They would be secret. After the 9/11 attacks, the Patriot Act was passed, which took the searching and seizure of people's information to a whole new level. And then, after it was discovered that the Bush administration secretly and illegally authorized the NSA to eavesdrop on people without even going to the secret FISA court, the law was further weakened by Congress in 2008 to make the Bush administration spying legal-ish. The point is that both the Patriot Act, which apparently no one read at the time it was passed, and the FISA law and the amendments to it drastically expanded the power of government. On June 1st, just 2 days ago from the time of this recording, 3 provisions of the Patriot Act have expired. For the last week, the drama in Congress has been about whether or not Congress would extend them or replace them with a bill the House passed called the USA Freedom Act. The first provision that expired is one that allowed so-called roving wiretaps, which allowed government officials to monitor multiple electronic devices belonging to the same person under the same secret Fisa warrant, a warrant that wasn't required to either name that specific person or the specific devices that the government officials wanted to tap. The second provision, which expired, which has been law since 2004, is one that's been known as the lone wolf provision, because it allows spying on people considered to be a, quote, agent of a foreign power, unquote, even if that person has no ties to hostile foreign governments or terrorist organizations. And then the third and most impactful provision that expired on Monday morning was Section 215 of the Patriot Act, which basically allowed the government to seize records from all types of businesses and then prohibited those businesses from telling anyone that the government had taken their records. Section 215 in particular has been used by the last two presidents, President George W. Bush and President Barack Obama, to justify the creation of a worldwide information collection system that the Patriot Act authors in Congress never intended. This is the author of the original Patriot Act, Representative James Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin, speaking to the House Judiciary Committee on April 30th.
Right now, as we speak, the NSA is collecting data on every call made to and from every American. The NSA claims the authority to do this is under Section 215 of the Patriot Act. I was the chairman of this committee on September 11th and the author of the Patriot Act. I can say in no uncertain terms that Congress did not intend to allow the bulk collection of Americans' records. The government's overbroad collection is based on a blatant misreading of the law.
Since the Patriot Act became law, we now know, thanks in large part to the documents released by former Booz Allen Hamilton employee/NSA contractor Edward Snowden, that the government has been collecting and storing just about all digital data. And on May 7th, just a few days before the passage of the USA Freedom Act in the House, the Federal Appeals Court, the second highest court we have, ruled that the executive branch's bulk collection of our phone records in particular, the type of collection the executive branch claimed Section 215 made legal, is actually illegal. No wiggle room there. Trial over. The executive branch, under the command of Presidents Bush and Obama, broke the law. And the thing is, even though Edward Snowden didn't give us the documents until 2013, we've known that this has been going on for a long time, and so have all of those people in Congress. In 2005, 10 years ago, even though the Bush administration asked them not to publish it, the New York Times published an article detailing that warrantless spying program. A year later, I'll never forget this, a whistleblower named Mark Klein, who was a technician that worked for AT&T, he gave us documents about the technology that was installed in AT&T hubs that copied all information that was transmitted over AT&T's wires and sent it to the NSA. These were dumb devices that they installed in these AT&T hubs. They couldn't filter anything. They just sent everything, meaning that every time the Bush and the Obama administrations told us and Congress that they weren't collecting, storing, or spying on Americans' communications, it was a lie.
You hear words domestic spying. No, these are not phone calls within the United States.
I had the programs reviewed. We put in some additional safeguards to make sure that there's federal court oversight as well as congressional oversight, that there is no spying on Americans. We don't have a domestic spying program.
They never thought we'd see the Snowden documents. They never thought they'd get caught. And here's a clip you just have to hear because you can actually hear a crime being committed. This is the head of the United States shadow government, intelligence community, the director of national intelligence, James Clapper, being questioned under oath during a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
And as Senator Rand Paul pointed out in the hours before the 3 Patriot Act provisions expired,
the head of the intelligence agency lied to the American people, and he still works here.
Yup, that guy is still in charge. Also worth noting is that the NSA, while President Obama and his Director of National Intelligence continued to tell us there was no domestic spying going on, they spent $2 billion in counting of our tax money to build and operate the Utah Data Center, which, according to a Wired magazine article that I have for you in the show notes from 2012, holds, quote, all forms of communication, including the complete documents of private emails, cell phone calls, and Google searches, as well as all sorts of personal data trails, parking receipts, travel itineraries, bookstore purchases, and other digital pocket litter, unquote. The Utah Data Center is 15 times the size of MetLife Stadium, where the Giants and the Jets play, and it's 7 times larger than the Pentagon. Do you really think that they need a facility that big to store the occasional phone call between terrorists? No. They needed to store all of our digital data, which they can then sift through for evidence anytime they suspect us of a crime, or if they just want to know what we're up to. So now that you know the background, let me catch you up on what's gone down since the last episode. As you probably know, my congressional obsession over the last few months has been the ramming through of fast-track legislation, which would give the same exact executive branch that is illegally collecting and storing the world's digital data the authority to create international law, and then taking away our branch of government's ability to amend those treaties. Well, unfortunately, Fast Track did pass the Senate, and it's now waiting for a vote in the House, which could really happen any day now. So call your representative. In the House, you only have one. But because Senator Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader who controls the schedule, because Mitch McConnell decided to ram through Fast Track, there was literally no time to properly debate the USA Freedom Act between May 13th, when it passed the House, and June 1st, when the 3 Patriot Act provisions would expire. At least not if the Senate wanted to take a week-and-a-half-long vacation for Memorial Day, which they did. Now, Mitch McConnell wants the Patriot Act to just be extended as it is, so he thought he'd play the emergency game, which we've seen play out so many times in the 2.5 years that Congressional Dish has been a thing. Here's Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon explaining how the emergency game is played.
It's always been the same pattern. It was almost like the night follows the day. Those who are in favor of dragnet surveillance and those who are in favor of the bulk collection program in effect, wait until the very last minute. They wait until the last minute, and then they say, oh my goodness, it is a dangerous world. We've got to continue this program just the way it is.
And sure enough,
ISIS has taken Palmyra. They are in the streets burning bodies, killing people, going to destroy 2,000-year-old antiquities. And at the same time, Ramadi has fallen, with thousands of innocent men, women, and children being massacred. And at this time, isn't this program as critical as it's ever been since its inception, given the fact that the Middle East is literally on fire and we are losing everywhere?
Can you believe that John McCain was almost president? Ugh. But anyway, the idea was that by not allowing votes until just before the deadline, Mitch McConnell could force the scaredy cats like John McCain in Congress to just renew the Patriot Act as it was. But that strategy didn't work out so well this time. I'll spare you the play-by-play because most people don't care, but before the Senate left for vacation, they failed to pass the extension of the Patriot Act that Mitch McConnell wanted or the USA Freedom Act. Hoping for a miracle, Mitch McConnell ordered the Senate to return from vacation on Sunday, May 31st for a series of Hail Mary votes, hoping to keep the spying alive with just a few hours to go. The only option, really, when the Senate came back on May 31st was to pass the USA Freedom Act unamended, because the USA Freedom Act had already passed the House. If the Senate passed it without any changes, it could go straight to the president's desk to be signed, which is what President Obama wanted. But thanks in large part to the procedural maneuvers of Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, the USA Freedom Act didn't pass and the roving wiretap, lone wolf, and Section 215 of the Patriot Act provisions expired. And so here's where we are now. The government, as of 7:44 Eastern Standard Time Sunday night, has stopped collecting everyone's phone records. Or at least that's what the executive branch says they did, which we know we can't really believe. But in theory, they're not collecting them anymore. The majority in Congress wants the USA Freedom Act to become law, and even the bill's worst enemy, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, said that it probably will. The question now, really, is whether or not the Senate will amend it and send it back to the House, or if they'll just pass it as it is and send it to President Obama. But what exactly is the USA Freedom Act? Well, that's what I'm going to tell you about today. So let's get started.
Yo, it's the Bill of Rights, it's the Bill of your rights. It's time to take your knowledge up to unfamiliar heights. The thrill of your life, just like riding a bike. You're never gonna forget the Bill of Rights. The right to free speech and religion and press are guaranteed by Amendment 1. Amendment number 2 says it's true that it's all up to you if you choose to possess a gun. The government can't force you to house and feed a soldier, says Amendment number 3. Amendment number 4, we adore, says without a warrant, your stuff can't be searched or seized. Yo, it's the Bill of Rights, it's the Bill of your rights. It's time to take.
So there have been headlines all over the place claiming that the USA Freedom Act ends bulk collection of our data. The Washington Post had a headline that says, quote, White House backs bill that would end NSA bulk collection of phone records, unquote. The New York Times had a headline, quote, House votes to end NSA's bulk phone data collection, unquote. The Associated Press, quote, House reaches deal on bill to end NSA phone collection, unquote. Forbes, quote, House says no to NSA bulk data collection as fight to end mass surveillance gathers momentum, unquote. And then there's The Guardian, quote, U.S. Congress to vote on bill banning NSA from bulk collecting phone calls, unquote. It's unanimous. According to the media, our phone calls and their records will no longer be collected. But, as always, I'm here to stomp all over your happy dreams and tell you that the bill doesn't actually do that. Not by a long shot. Now keep in mind while I tell you all of this that right now, as I record this, Section 215 of the Patriot Act, which authorizes collection of phone records, is dead. Like actually dead. They cannot collect and store our phone call records without a warrant. If the USA Freedom Act passes, it brings collection of phone records back from the dead until December 15th, 2019, although it will be done a bit differently. Here's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Bob Goodlatte, in a hearing that took place on April 30th, during which the USA Freedom Act passed the committee before it went to the House floor.
At the heart of this legislation is the reform of Section 215 to prohibit bulk collection of any business records. Bulk collection is also prohibited under the Fisa Pen Register Trap and Trace Device Authority and National Security Letter authorities. The USA Freedom Act strengthens the definition of specific selection term, the mechanism used to prohibit bulk collection, to ensure the government can collect the information it needs to further a national security investigation while also prohibiting large-scale indiscriminate collection.
So Bob Goodlatte gave you a hint right there. The USA Freedom Act uses a mechanism to end bulk collection. It doesn't actually make bulk collection of data illegal. Now let me explain how this works. The USA Freedom Act says that in order to collect our phone records, the government will need to provide, quote, a specific selection term, unquote, to be used for the basis for the data being collected. This term cannot be the name of a telecom unless that telecom itself is under investigation. So for instance, as they have done in the past, they can't get one of these secret Fisa warrants for everything that is being held by Verizon, unless they're investigating Verizon for a crime. The term also can't be a, quote, broad geographic region, including the United States, a city, a county, a state, a zip code, or an area code, unquote. So along the same lines, they can't go to the FISA court and say we need the records for everyone in Oakland. The term also needs to be something that, quote, specifically identifies an individual, account, or personal device, unquote, and also limits ongoing phone call record collection to 180 days unless it's extended. Now, all of this sounds good and like it could end bulk collection, but here's the problem. Section 215 is only one of the ways that the government is justifying illegally collecting our records and data, and the USA Freedom Act doesn't touch the other ones. Here's Zoe Lofgren of California in the April 30th hearing.
I want to be clear that while I do believe this bill makes meaningful reforms, it doesn't stop the bulk collection. And I understand and I do respect Mr. Sensenbrenner's effort and the comments made by the chair and ranking member. But the most egregious and widely reported violations of the Fourth Amendment are occurring under 702 and Executive Order 12333.
So first, let's take a look at Section 702 of the bill that created the secret FISA courts. Here's Representative Ted Poe of Texas, who tried and failed to attach a very popular amendment to the USA Freedom Act that would have ended Section 702 authorities.
We've also learned that there is a data collection program authorized under Section 702 of FISA that is being abused by our government. This program is collecting actual communications, not just metadata. That is conversations and emails. The intent of this program is to target foreign nationals who are located outside the U.S. and who are acting as agents of foreign powers. However, in the scope of this collection, communications, actual communications of American citizens is often captured. Sometimes these Americans have been committed no crime at all. The communication may be with nefarious intent, or some of them may have simply been calling their cousin. In any event, under current law, the government can search the database on a fishing expedition and get those communications created under this program, including searching information about a U.S. citizen. This can be done without a warrant. That seems to violate the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution to me.
And in case you're wondering, it has been proven that Section 702 of FISA is being used to collect and store the actual content of our calls and emails, even if we American citizens have had nothing to do with terrorism. Here's Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky explaining how and to what extent this has happened.
When they looked at some of this recently, the Washington Post looked at this, they found that 9 of 10 intercepted conversations were not the intended target. So I think there was one estimate that in the last year we had 89,000 targets. But if you multiply that and say that's only 1/10 of what we actually take, you're now looking at 900,000 records of people who had nothing to do with terrorism. Didn't even really talk to the person. They incidentally talked to a person who talked to the person. It could be the terrorist called Papa John's, and you've called Papa John's. You're now in the same phone tree network. So it can ripple out in ways. That information shouldn't be collected, it shouldn't be put in a database, and it shouldn't be stored. Because ultimately we're collecting so much information that it's all of your information.
The other way that the government is justifying collecting all of our digital information is via an executive order originally created by President Ronald Reagan in 1981, Executive Order 12333. Here's Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky explaining what Executive Order 12333 theoretically allows the executive branch to do. In this clip you're about to hear, Senator Rand Paul references a 2014 editorial in the Washington Post about Executive Order 12333, written by a whistleblower named John Napier Tye. John Napier Tye was the section chief for Internet Freedom in the State Department's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, which I didn't know was a thing, but apparently it is, and this guy was in charge of it from 2011 till 2014. He wrote this article shortly after leaving the government, and I've included a link to it in the show notes.
Now the big thing that they tell us is, well, we're not collecting the content, we're just collecting the numbers. But when you read John Napier Tye, he says that the executive order authorizes collection of the content of the communications also, not just metadata, and also for U.S. persons. So the question is, if we get rid of bulk collection, will the executive continue to do it anyway?
Here's some specifics on how this works from John Napier Tye's article, which is information he received in top secret NSA briefings. Quote, unlike Section 215, the executive order authorizes collection of the content of communications, not just metadata, even for U.S. persons. Such persons cannot be individually targeted with 12333 without a court order. However, if the contents of a U.S. person's communications are, quote, incidentally, unquote, collected, an NSA term of art, in the course of lawful overseas foreign intelligence investigations, then Section 2.3c of the executive order explicitly authorizes their retention. It does not require that the affected U.S. persons be suspected of wrongdoing and places no limits on the volume of communications by U.S. persons that may be collected and retained, unquote. So let's be very clear here. The USA Freedom Act does not end bulk collection of data because it does not make bulk collection expressly illegal or make any changes to either Section 702 of the FISA law or Executive Order 12333. If you walk away from this episode remembering only one thing about the USA Freedom Act, I hope that is it. And by the way, Representative Ted Poe's amendment to kill Section 702 authority to collect the content of our calls was supported by damn near everyone on the House Judiciary Committee, but it wasn't added to the USA Freedom Act because it was made very clear that the USA Freedom Act would die if it was. Here's Gerald Nadler of New York, one of the lucky few who was part of the negotiations that created the USA Freedom Act, explaining why this popular amendment wasn't added. And just so you know, Gerald Nadler forgot to turn on his microphone, so please excuse the weird sound quality here.
I agree that it is vital that we enact it as soon as possible. I voted for it last year on the floor. I will vote for it again. But it will blow up the bill. And why will it blow up the bill? To be blunt, because the leadership of the House says it will. They will not permit this bill to the floor, we are told, by them, if this amendment is part of the bill. We have no reason to disbelieve them, and they have the power to do what they say they will do. The Rules Committee can block this bill, and undoubtedly will if this amendment is adopted.
So the people in charge of Congress, specifically Speaker John Boehner and Senator Mitch McConnell, would not allow the USA Freedom Act to even get a vote if it actually ended bulk collection of the content of our phone calls. And no one at all, was even suggesting doing anything about Executive Order 12333. The bottom line is that the 114th Congress is not seriously trying to end the bulk collection of our data. And don't let lazy journalists who just repeat what they're told tell you otherwise. Okay, so back to the details of what the USA Freedom Act does do. Here's Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee Bob Goodlatte talking about the changes to Section 215 of the Patriot Act again.
In place of the current bulk telephone metadata program, the USA Freedom Act creates a narrower, targeted program that allows the intelligence community to collect non-content call detail records held by the telephone companies, but only with the prior approval of the Fisa court.
So the call records, which are illegal to store under current law as of 2 days ago, would be allowed to be stored again, but instead of them being held in the Utah Data Center, they would be held by the phone companies. Now, one thing that I like as a phone company customer, as an American, as a human, but that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell doesn't like as a creepy, power-hungry lizard person, is that the bill doesn't require that our phone companies hold on to our records. Here's Senator Mitch McConnell, who, like I said, would prefer that we bring back the Patriot Act provisions just as they were, expressing his USA Freedom Act concerns just hours before the deadline.
I know senators from both parties have been disturbed by the administration's continuing inability to guarantee whether the new system would work as well as the current one, or whether there would even be any data available to analyze. Because while the administration has let it be known that this non-existent system could only be built in time if telephone providers cooperate in building it, providers have made it abundantly clear that they're not going to commit to retaining the data. They're not going to commit to retaining the data for any period of time unless legally required to do so. And there's no such requirement in the House-passed bill. None at all.
And he's right. I double-checked. It's not in there. Instead, the bill gives companies that participate by storing and handing over our data immunity from criminal and civil prosecution for doing so. And then, of course, the bill also gives them money. Companies that store and hand over our data would be given cold, hard cash. And it doesn't say how much, but there sure as shit weren't any limits. So as a customer, in theory, it could be a good thing that we could shop for a company that promises to destroy our records. The problem is that we'll have no way of knowing which companies do that and which companies are getting paid to play because the USA Freedom Act orders the telecoms to keep orders from the government secret. So how are we going to know if our phone company is complying? However, one thing I do like about this bill is that when the government does demand call detail records, the definition of call detail record changes so that it does not include the contents of our call, our names, addresses, financial information, or our cell phone's GPS location. So the government won't be legally allowed to use the call records as physical tracking devices, at least not using Section 215 authority if our Congress does, in fact, bring it back from the dead. As for when this new system would come into effect, the government would have 180 days to comply after the bill is signed into law. In the meantime, I'm pretty sure that the Patriot Act in its original form would come back from the dead to become law again. Although now that the provisions have expired, I'm not entirely sure. So moving on, we heard Bob Goodlatte say a few minutes ago that the USA Freedom Act would also prohibit bulk collection using national security letter authorities, which is also kind of bullshit. Here's Senator Rand Paul explaining what a national security letter is.
In a 3-year period between 2003 and 2006, 140,000 national security letters were given out. So national security letters are warrants that are below the constitutional bar. They don't meet the constitutional bar because they're not being signed by a judge. They're being signed by the police. So you get rid of one of the great protections we had, which was the check and balance that the police would always go to the judiciary.
Now, one thing I do want to clarify, since we've seen a lot of anger lately expressed towards local police, is that the cops cruising your neighborhood in uniform are not allowed to sign their own warrants. It's the FBI specifically who are allowed to issue these warrants, these national security letters. But calling FBI agents police is not inaccurate. You know, Johnny Utah.
I am an FBI agent.
FBI agents definitely do police work, and the Patriot Act allowed them to skip the whole process of establishing probable cause and getting a judge's approval before busting down your door and searching through your shit, which is just about as unconstitutional as it gets. So how does the USA Freedom Act fix this? Well, it says that national security letters can be used for telephone, financial, and consumer records if the order, quote, specifically identifies a person, entity, phone number, or account as the basis for a request, unquote. Here's one of Senator Rand Paul's concerns with that wording.
It says that there have to be specific selector terms on U.S. persons. Part of my problem is that persons is still defined as corporations. My concern is that you could put the word Verizon in there and the government wouldn't be collecting the records, but you still could get all the records from Verizon.
The word entity is pretty goddamn broad too. In addition, there will be a gag order preventing companies from telling anyone that the FBI issued their own warrant for your information, as long as the warrant notifies the telecoms of their right to judicial review. The telecom's right to judicial review, not yours. And if the FBI says that telling us about the warrant would result in, quote, a danger to the national security of the United States, interference with a criminal, counterterrorism, or counterintelligence investigation, danger to the life or physical safety of any person, or interference with diplomatic relations, unquote. And that one about diplomatic relations, that one's new. So instead of a judge having to approve a warrant before it's issued, a judge would only get involved if your telephone company puts up a fight. Then your telephone company would be prohibited from telling you, their customer, that they handed over your data as long as the FBI can bullshit some reason for hiding that information from you. I mean, all they'd have to say is that telling you would interfere with their investigation, which of course it would, because you'd probably try to fight the illegal search in court, making their investigation harder. It's so easy, it's no protection at all. The only reform to national security letters that I like even a teeny tiny bit is that the USA Freedom Act eliminates a part of the law that allowed judges to immediately dismiss cases from companies fighting FISA orders. Other than that, the national security letters can still be easily used by the FBI, the federal police, as warrants, and those warrants can easily be kept secret. And then there are the emergency powers. First, the USA Freedom Act would allow the Attorney General, a person appointed by the President, to require records to be turned over in emergencies. All he or she would have to do is inform a judge and then apply for a warrant within 7 days after the spying begins. It also allows the Attorney General to physically monitor us if we're outside the United States for 72 hours without a warrant. The Attorney General will also be the person who gets to write the procedures to protect our privacy. After the Attorney General finally seeks the warrant from a judge, if the warrant is denied, the bill says that anything collected under the Attorney General's emergency power will not be admissible in court, except, quote, with the approval of the Attorney General, if the information indicates a threat of death or serious bodily harm to any person, unquote. And who will determine if these standards are met? The Attorney General. There's literally no one who does any oversight at all on the Attorney General in this process. And then, get this, the, quote, limits on the use of illegally collected information, unquote, can be waived if the government fixes whatever illegal thing they were doing, which would allow the information that they've been collecting illegally for the last 12 years to be used in court. And I think this is one of the biggest problems with the USA Freedom Act, and it's not one that's really being discussed at all. The courts have said that the executive branch under both the Bush and Obama administrations have been breaking the law by collecting all of our digital information. And we know that the information illegally collected is being used to convict people of domestic crimes, many of them drug-related. In a country that is governed by the Constitution, a lot of these people who have had Patriot Act spying provisions used against them in court should be able to go back to court to get that evidence thrown out. Would this be messy? Oh, yes. And would people probably be let out of prison? Yeah, that's likely. But that's what happens when the government breaks the law. This is exactly what the Constitution is for, to make sure that we don't get locked up on weed charges when the government uses illegally obtained information. This provision of the USA Freedom Act lets the executive branch off the hook for breaking not just the law, but the friggin' Constitution. And more importantly, it would guarantee that citizens whose rights were violated will stay behind bars. This provision is fucked, and it's one of the main reasons why I hate this bill. It stomps all over our right to a fair trial. Speaking of a fair trial, let's get back to the secret Fisa court, where you don't get a lawyer or to argue your case at all. One of the things that's supposed to make us love the USA Freedom Act is that it appoints amicus curiae, friends of the court, to argue on behalf of privacy and civil liberties. But once again, there are loopholes in here big enough to drive a truck through. First of all, the 5 or more people who will be selected to be our privacy friends on the secret court will be selected by the secret courts, the Fisa judges. Then the secret court judges will write the rules for our privacy friends' participation. Participation which isn't even guaranteed because the secret court gets to decide if our privacy friends' participation is appropriate on a case-by-case basis. And what power will our privacy friends have if they're invited to participate? None. None at all. They have no power to stop anything illegal from happening. They can bitch about it to the Fisa court, but that is all. Another thing I've seen happily reported by the lazy press is that the USA Freedom Act requires the Fisa court to publicly release their decisions. Yippee! Except no, that's bullshit too. The bill says that the Director of National Intelligence must make publicly available, quote, to the greatest extent practicable, unquote, any Fisa court decision that includes, quote, a significant construction or interpretation of any provision of law, unquote. 2 giant loopholes here. First, if the Director of National Intelligence, a position currently held by a guy so trustworthy that he lied under oath to Congress, if that guy says that it's not practicable to release the decision, it doesn't get released. And second, if James fucking Clapper or whatever spook comes after him says that it didn't contain a significant interpretation of law, then the Fisa decision doesn't have to be released. Also, when these decisions do get released, they can be released to the public in redacted form, so with big black lines covering all the information. And then, of course, this bill includes the mother of all loopholes. The Director of National Intelligence can waive the requirement to make Fisa decisions, orders, and opinions public as long as they say it's, quote, necessary to protect the national security of the United States or properly classified intelligence sources or methods, unquote. So, will we get to see the secret Fisa court decisions if the USA Freedom Act becomes law? Only the ones James Clapper and the executive branch want us to see. And last, let's talk about the rest of the secret Fisa court transparency provisions. What are they? Well, the government will have to submit a few more reports to Congress. Also, companies that are served warrants by the FBI, the national security letters, will finally be allowed to publicly report approximately how many of them they received. Emphasis on the word approximately. For example, twice a year, the companies can report the number of spying orders they received that are subject to a gag order to the nearest 1,000. And they can tell us the spying orders that are not subject to a gag order to the nearest 500. The best report the companies will be allowed to give us is a report once per year on the total number of all kinds of orders. So Fisa orders, directives, national security letters combined to the nearest 100. But of course, these reports are voluntary. We may not get them at all. And that's as transparent as it gets. And then there's one last thing. This was tacked on to the end of the bill, and I just think it's worth knowing. The end of the USA Freedom Act, as passed by the House, allows the government to seize the possessions of people suspected of trying to harm a United States ship, also known as civil forfeiture. Civil forfeiture has been getting a decent amount of publicity lately, most brilliantly by John Oliver on his HBO show Last Week Tonight.
The way civil forfeiture generally works is that if the police believe they have a preponderance of the evidence that suggests your property was or could be used in a crime, they may confiscate it. And it gets even weirder.
Many folks are unfamiliar with the idea of civil forfeiture, which is actually a case brought directly against a piece of property where you don't need to be proven guilty of a crime for your goods to be taken away.
Exactly. You don't need to be charged with a crime because it's not you that's on trial, it's your stuff. That's why these cases have historically had eye-catching names, such as, and all of these are real, United States versus $8,850 in US currency, United States versus an article consisting of 50,000 cardboard boxes, more or less, each containing one pair of clackerballs, and United States versus approximately 64,695 pounds of shark fins, which must have been an amazing court case. And do you see those shark fins in the room right now? Yes! There they are! There they are! Let the record show the witnesses pointed at roughly 65,000 pounds of shark fins. Guilty, guilty. And it's also worth noting that your possessions generally have fewer protections under the law than you do.
Under civil forfeiture laws, your property is guilty until you prove it innocent.
How can that be possible? At this point, I'm surprised objects don't have their own civil rights leader, like Martin Scooter King or Harvey Carton of Milk.
So even after civil forfeiture has gotten some press by people we actually watch, and even though it's clearly a violation of the Constitution, our representation in Congress has decided to expand the practice by allowing the government to take your shit merely by saying you might harm a ship. But it's not just your stuff that's in danger of being taken here, because the end of the USA Freedom Act also assesses a fine of up to $2 million and a possible life in prison sentence to a person who possesses radioactive material or a device with intent to damage people or property, or someone who threatens to do so. So you can be locked up for life for threatening to use radioactive material, regardless of whether or not you actually have any. How's that for USA freedom? This bill was written by Representative James Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin, the same guy who wrote the Patriot Act. It passed the House of Representatives 338 to 88, with only 47 Republicans and 41 Democrats voting against it, damn near even. The Senate is voting right now on the USA Freedom Act, and they just voted down all of the amendments, which means, barring some miracle, it's going to pass unchanged in just a few hours and get signed into law probably by the time you hear this episode. And I'm already seeing people who haven't read it calling it a victory for privacy. But we know better. We know there's still a lot of work to do. The plain fact is that the two parties controlling our government have invested a giant chunk of our tax money to build a system to collect all our digital information. And a system like that is not something that the people who built it and who use it to control us are likely to just turn off. It's going to take a change in leadership. It's going to take new people in Congress who are not a part of either of these parties to ever really change these laws. The great news is that we have the opportunity to elect new federal representatives next year, and again every 2 years after that. However, on top of changing the people in charge who then will change the laws to make this crap illegal again, I think we also need to do something about the fact that the creation of this system was illegal in the first place. I mean, think about what went on, what's still going on here. The executive branch, under two presidents representing each of the two parties that control our country, secretly used billions of our dollars to construct infrastructure to collect all of the digital information in the world, which our highest courts have ruled illegal. They weren't allowed to do what they did, and they knowingly deceived the United States taxpayers about it.
You hear words domestic spying. No, these are not phone calls within the United States.
There is no spying on Americans. We don't have a domestic spying program.
Both presidents, both parties, work together to commit a major crime, and it's been proven. And yet we seem to just be resigned to let them get away with it. Why? When did Americans become such pussies? Seriously. We've just accepted for some reason that they get to do whatever they want, and there's nothing we can do about it, even though that's not true. Why? The fact is that this country does have options. This country could hold them accountable. If we just, let's for just 1 second, put all the political bullshit aside. The fact is that George W. Bush has not been pardoned for any of his crimes. He could be arrested and put on trial. And then obviously President Obama hasn't been arrested either. In fact, he's still in office, still being trusted to defend the Constitution that he's been proven to disobey. The least we could do is fire him, which could be done through the impeachment process in Congress, our branch of government. We can hold both of these men accountable starting tomorrow morning, if the will was there. But that's the problem. It's not. They are openly getting away with breaking the law, and no one, not just in Congress, no one is even suggesting that we do anything about it. And I think that's the source of the rot in our entire system, that we have people in this country who are invincible, who have to follow no laws, and that lawlessness trickles down from the top. The system the invincible ones have created gives immunity to their partners, making anyone who teams up with them invincible too. No one at the top of the responsibility chain ever goes to jail when they're proven to have committed crimes. Not the presidents or vice presidents or NSA directors or telecom executives. No one goes to jail. Clearly, because if setting up an unconstitutional system to collect all the digital data in the world isn't a punishable crime, I don't know what is. The only person that anyone is trying to put behind bars for the global spying dragnet is Edward Snowden, not for helping create it, but for telling us about it. There's so many people who were involved in setting up this spying system, who learned about the Fourth Amendment in the 3rd grade just like we did, who had to know it was unconstitutional, but helped set it up anyway because they knew damn well that the invincible one at the top had their backs. But what if there was no invincible one at the top? What if there was no one with the ability to hand out get-out-of-jail-free cards? Do you think maybe more people would have been hesitant to go along? Hell, if Bush had been impeached or arrested, do you think Obama would have been as willing to go along? I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the law will continue to be meaningless without enforcement all the way up to the top. And if that's ever going to happen, each one of us needs to demand it. But until we do, it's this brand of USA freedom that we're gonna get.
I'll let you in on a secret that every scoundrel knows. Whether he's perched on a pulpit or wrapped in a flag that glows, there ain't no savior to break bad behavior, no great judgment day in the sky. I've got the answer to corporate cancer, all truth-dodging dancers in high places without a soul. 'Cause I took a poll, let the heads roll, let the heads roll into a hole blacker than coal. Thousands have died in the scapegoat chair fried for the pride of the crooks in control. Let their heads roll. Let the heads roll.
Okay, so this is the part of the show where I talk to the producers, the people who make this show possible every month. This is where I thank the subscribers and the contributors and the people who chip in Bitcoin. And this is where I answer your questions and kind of tell you what's going on behind the scenes in this show. And I got a little bit of feedback from just a couple of people who are actually all very nice about it. But I got a little bit of feedback from people who said that they generally don't give a shit about me or what happens behind the scenes of the show, and they would rather just hear about the bills and have me shut the fuck up. And I totally get that. I too am shocked that anyone gives a damn about me or what happens behind the scenes of the show, but the fact is that some people do. And so this is kind of how this is going to work from here on forward. When you hear the music after I'm done talking about the bills and laws and the stuff that the show is about, after you hear the music, you're done. Turn off the episode if you don't want to hear it. I'm not going to do that thing where I try and trick you and I put really important stuff at the end so that you listen all the way through. I really don't care if you listen to this part of the episode. This is available for people who do care. And if you don't, class dismissed. Bye. So for those of you who haven't turned off the episode, I would like to tell you that I did go on another podcast. It's called Profitcast, and it's hosted by my friend Brian. And this show, Profitcast, is about people who are podcasting and what they're doing to make a living from it. And so obviously this is something that I struggle with every day. And what I really like about Profitcast is Brian is not some mastermind who's giving you all the answers. He is someone just like me who's trying to figure them out. And so he is going around and looking for people that he thinks are doing something right and interviewing them to find out what their strategies are. And so because you are supporting this podcast as much as you are, I was invited on that show. And so I kind of talked to Brian, who's a friend of mine, about money and some other stuff. We talked about New Media Expo and we had a few laughs. So I actually really enjoyed that appearance. I enjoy most of my appearances. And so that's called Profitcast, and I will include links to that episode in the show notes. As for the next episode of Congressional Dish, I was working on the April bills, and I did that thing that I said I wasn't going to do, and I dropped what I was doing in order to deal with the USA Freedom Act because this was happening in real time. And so the April bills episode, I'm actually pretty close to being done with it. But the two biggest bills from April that I'm going to be talking about are cybersecurity bills that passed the House that are actually shockingly similar to the USA Freedom Act. And I'm just going to leave it there because that's obviously a subject for the next episode. But the next episode's pretty fascinating because cybersecurity is it's a racket. So that's what we're going to talk about the next episode, which I should have out in, a week or two. It shouldn't take very long, I promise. Also, one more thing before I get to the subscribers and contributors is I told you guys that I'm going to be taking a trip around the country this summer. And so there are going to be 2 meetups, and I don't have all the details of these yet, but I do have dates. So Chicago, I'm going to be doing a meetup on the night of Wednesday, August 5th. And what I'm really excited about is it's going to be a co-meetup with the hosts of Political Discontent, Lauren and Kevin. Lauren and Kevin were the first people to ever invite me on their podcast, and we've been friends ever since. And this is going to be the first time we meet in person, and we're hoping you'll come and hang out with us too. So that's the night of Wednesday, August 5th. Then also, I'll be doing a meetup in Miami, and this one I will be attending a Emerge Miami meeting on Tuesday, August 18th. Now, I don't have all the details of that yet, but just mark your calendars. Chicago, August 5th, Miami, August 18th. Both of those are at night, and I really hope to meet you there. All right, so subscribers. Subscribers really carried Congressional Dish for this month. Financially, this was the worst month we've had since March. And without the subscribers, I would probably be crying right now. So subscribers remain vital to this show. And just so you don't know the terminology, subscribers are people that have signed up to contribute monthly to Congressional Dish. And so they're just essential. They're the only reason that I can budget and even have a chance to be hiring anyone to help me with the show, because right now I'm still doing it by myself, but I am going to be training someone to help me, grab the clips and do some of the busy work. And I'm going to be training this person and paying this person as of next week. So I'm really excited, and that's only possible because of the existing subscribers. So thank you guys as always. And for these 7 new people, which include Christopher Meek, who's chipping in $20 a month, Jonathan Smith, who's chipping in $12 a month, Robert Fanning, who's chipping in $11 a month, Tony Tony Isquierdo. I'm sorry, Tony, but Tony's chipping in $10 a month, and he has a name I have a really tough time pronouncing. I hope I mean no disrespect. I don't know how to say things. We also are getting $5 a month from Randy Verdusco, $5 a month from Greg Malik, and $5 a month from Adam Schnackner. So thank you to my new subscribers and old subscribers. Honestly, Congressional Dish would not exist without you, and that is not an exaggeration. As for one-time contributors this week, people who contributed via PayPal, the winner of the week, we got $100 from Antonios Benetados, and this is actually not his first contribution, so thank you for coming back to chip into the show. And he left a note. He said, "Well done on the TPA/TPP delay." And thank you. I don't think that, we really did that. And also it passed the Senate. So before we pat ourselves on the back, we should probably stop it in the House. But, it is kind of fun to feel like we're making a difference, and it did get delayed. So let's call our representatives in the House, where the TPA fast track bill is now sitting, and try and make a difference there, because the House was always the one where this bill was going to get in trouble. The House is still not said when they're going to vote on it. So your phone calls to your one House representative, this is the time to do it, and it could actually make a big difference. So let's get on that. And then he also said, referring to the fast track bill, beware, it is a hydra. It will be back, which you are right. And he also asked to please keep an eye on HR 2048, the USA Freedom Act, and how it pertains to the NSA. And he says, all the best, Antonios. And wish granted, my love. I hope you like this episode. Then we also got $50 from Hunter Warren. And we got $40 from David Gottardo. David Gottardo. And we got $30 from Garrett Tuft. Thank you all for your contributions. And then we got $20 from Brian Connolly, who left a note. He said, "Hi, Jennifer. This is my first contribution. I regret being a freeloader for so long. I wish I could contribute more to your much-needed podcast. You are doing a great service to this country. I tell a lot of friends to listen, especially those that have no clue what's going on in the world. Unfortunately, they don't like to listen to me either." Which is really funny, because that's part of the reason I started Congressional Dish, because I annoy the crap out of my friends and family. Anyway, Brian says, "I promise to make recurring donations in the future. However, I'm currently saving for my wedding, and it's just tough right now, Brian, I do know. I got married, and it was insanely expensive. And you know what's annoying about getting married is that if I knew before I got married all of the stuff I know now, I would have done it completely different. But it's like the industry profits off the fact that we don't know what the hell we're doing. So congratulations on your marriage, and I hope that the wedding doesn't make you crazy." And I hope it goes perfectly. Brian also says, "I just want to make sure you know that I support you. Most importantly, you have influenced me to become more informed and to participate more in politics. Yay! I've always cared, but now I contact my representatives often. I can't even count how many times I've called and emailed about the TPP and TPA. Brian, that's awesome." He also says, "You've also inspired me to become much more vocal about what we all should care about. Thank you for everything you do. Keep up the awesome work. You are awesome, Brian Connolly." Brian, such a nice note. That's great that you are calling your emails and getting involved in politics, because that's why I do what I do. So I love it when you guys tell me that. Thank you so much. And yeah, keep up those calls about Fast Track. We are not done. We also got $20 from Alicia Silver. And Alicia says, hi there, I'm a newer listener, and so far I'm in love. I've actually begun listening to the podcast backwards, from most recent to less, so that I can pick up on pieces of legislation that I should keep an eye on. And I'm slowly making my way through your episodes. Alicia, that's actually a really good way to do this, because one thing that you should know is that everything before January of this year is dead. Those are all dead bills. Now, some of them have come back to life, but as for things you should keep an eye on now, definitely make sure that you're listening from January on forward. As for the back catalog of Congressional Dish, there's some interesting stuff in there, especially the story of the 113th Congress. That's episode number 83. And that'll pretty much catch you up on anything that happened, anything and everything that happened in the previous Congress. But to actually listen to those, to know what you should act on, anything from December on back is all dead. You don't have to worry about those bills anymore. Yeah. Alicia also says, I also had some questions and comments. She says, I was wondering if you were able to create either a page on your website or write a blog about your methodology. To lessen the murkiness of our legislation system, it would be great to see what resources you use and where I too can find them. This would create a more transparent system of individuals literate in policymaking. It's a really good idea, and I have a long list of really good ideas that I simply don't have the time for right now because I'm still producing this podcast all by myself. So all those clips that you heard today, I'm the one who's physically going there, recording them, cutting them down to size. Like, there's a lot of busy work involved in this, so I don't really have time right now to really write anything or to do anything extra. But it's not a bad idea. The other part of it is that my methodology is still really changing because I am learning with every single episode. So I'm not at that point yet where I want to tell you this is the best way to do things because I'm still learning myself. What I can tell you is that the resources I use the most, number one, by far, is govtrack.us. What I like about GovTrack is it automatically takes the information from the government website. So what bills pass, what's signed into law. They'll email you this information if you want. But what I like about it more than the government websites is it's so user-friendly. Just the way it's designed, it's just brilliant. And if you go to any of my show notes and you click, like this show notes for this episode is a perfect example because you can look through the USA Freedom Act in my outline of it. And if you click on the links, you can go, it'll show you the exact part of the bill where I got that information from. And that's because GovTrack makes those links possible. So govtrack.us is a beautiful site. And if you just want to know more about your government, go and play with it and sign up for email alerts. They'll alert you anytime your person introduces something, or they'll keep you up to date on how your representatives are voting. It's such an amazing website. I use it all the time. The other website that I depend on heavily is opensecrets.org, and that's how I find out who's paying our congressmen and senators. That's opensecrets.org, and between those two websites, there's really nothing else you need to know. I can get more detailed if you have more questions like that. The next time you contribute, ask me the specific questions, and I'd be happy to answer them as we go. But as for really working on the website right now, I don't want to promise something that I can't do. And right now I just can't do it. And I'm really sorry about that. Let's see. And then the rest of Alicia's note is basically saying I'm one of those people that doesn't care about your pets and all that stuff. And Alicia, I totally get that. But like I said, after the music, turn it off. You're good to go. I'm not going to trick you and put important stuff after the music. All righty. Oh, and thank you for your contribution and your note. You're very sweet. We also got the most fun donation of the month was $11.22 from Paul Chadman. We got $10 from Brian Pattison of Kansas. We got $10 from Ann Withrow, and she left a note. She says, new listener, heard about you on Sam Cedars' Majority Report. Hang in there and keep up the good fight. And Ann, I didn't know that Sam had discussed Congressional Dish. That is very cool. I don't know if you knew this, but I met him at New Media Expo, and he was just so nice. And yeah, he's a great guy, and I didn't know that he really remembered me and talked about me on his show. So if you know which episode that was, I would love to hear it. If you could just send me an email and let me know. That's very cool of Sam. And very exciting because I've been a fan of Sam Cedars since he was hanging out with Mark Maron in the break room and talking about politics on Break Room Live. I mean, I used to think that they had my dream job, and so I just kind of created one just like it. So to know that Sam actually knows my name is just like, I don't know, it makes the little geek inside of me get all excited. Let's see. We also got $10 from Alex Lukyanov, who left a note. He said, just heard of your podcast and immediately loved it. Listened to one episode and can't thank you enough for this. Hey, freeloaders. Alex listened to one episode and chipped in. You are awesome, Alex. Thank you. Thank you. That is so great. And I'm happy to know you're listening. We also got $5 from Garrett McSpadden, Clifford Smith, Stephen Pulowski, and Joe Carter. We got $5 from Melissa Pollitt, who left a note. She said, I wish we could send more, but we are IRS employees and are preparing to be laid off. F you, Congress. God, that sucks, Melissa. I'm so sorry to hear that. She also said, so glad I found your podcast and will gladly send more when we are back to work. Our thoughts are with Pepper, and we wish your family the best. And then her message was cut off. Melissa, thank you so much. And a few people have reached out to me about Pepper, and I really appreciate that. And I am I'm sad to tell you that she passed away on Monday. I miss her, and I'll leave it at that. So, but thank you for saying that. She was the best pet we've ever had. So thank you. And then last we got $5 from Greg Padgett, who left a note too, and he said, really love the podcast, Jen. I started listening recently and have been making my way through the show slowly but surely. It's so refreshing to be able to listen to your show. You really do your homework and present your subject matter in a way someone and PayPal cut off your note. I don't know why PayPal does that. Like sometimes I can get really long notes, like the ones from Alicia and Brian, and then sometimes the notes just die off, and I don't know why. If you want to send a longer note, the best way to do it is to email me. Yeah. So, but Greg, thank you so much for chipping in, and thank you to everyone who chipped in. We also got one Bitcoin contribution that I should mention. It was anonymous, but it was for 0.15 of a Bitcoin, which is about $40. So that was a significant one. Thank you very much. And I still don't really know what we're going to do with Bitcoin because the value just keeps dropping. So I just leave the Bitcoin in there, and I'm hoping that all the predictions come true, and at some point, like, it goes back up. But I do appreciate all of the contributions. I hope this Bitcoin thing works out as much as the people who like it want it to. And then last but not least, we have physical checks. We got $100, who actually, you are the winner, Mr. John Flynn, because John and Vanessa Flynn, I should say, because with a physical check, $100 in a physical check means that nobody took a cut. So every one of these pennies is going to go to Congressional Dish, where the $100 that went to PayPal takes 3%. So John and Vanessa, thank you for the check. We also got another $50 from Brian Watson. Thank you, Brian. We got $20 from Keith Hausner, and thank you, Keith. We also got $20 in cash from Bill Bixler, who sent me a note, and it says, Jen, please accept this small token of my gratitude for all of the mind-numbing hours of C-SPAN you listen to and the excellent job you do of boiling it down to something palatable, relevant, and interesting. For the first time ever, because of your show, I have written and called my representatives in Congress to voice my concern over TPA, TPP, and TTIP. You should know that the work you do on your podcast is having a real effect on people's actions. Keep it up. Bill Bixler of Los Angeles. Bill, that's so amazing that you guys are writing to your representatives. Thank you for telling me that. And as for the mind-numbing hours of C-SPAN, my dirty little secret is I kind of like it. All of the clips that I get from the House floor, those of you who have listened this far into the episode get my dirty little secrets. All of the clips from the House floor, the vast majority of the time, I read those. So I don't actually sit there all day and watch what happens. I can read them and then look through the timestamp to find it and then clip it from the text. So it's not really cheating, but I'm not sitting there watching TV all day. I mean, that would, God, I'd put a gun in my mouth. But as for the hearings, I love the hearings, especially the markup hearings, because they think nobody's watching. And yeah, it takes a really long time to do, but what I like to do is I download, it's kind of a convoluted way to do this because you can't just download the MP3, but I do a ridiculous process to get the hearings onto my phone. And then I go for walks. So I'll walk for 2-3 hours to get my exercise while listening to the hearings and taking notes as I go. So that's why having a virtual assistant is going to be really helpful, because what I'll do from there on forward is I'm going to send those notes to another person who can grab the clips from my notes. And so I don't spend the next day grabbing all the relevant clips, and that should hopefully speed up these episodes for you guys. So, yeah, there's a little bit of how the sausage is made here at Congressional Dish. And then last, we got a $10 check from Patrick Cardone, who said, Jen, learned a lot from the show on Fast Track TPA. Keep up the great work, Pat. So thank you guys. One thing that I think you guys will probably notice is that a lot of these contributions came in for the Fast Track episodes, which is fantastic. I'm glad you guys like those so much. But the cruel irony for me is that the episodes that always make me the least amount of money are the ones that are the most painful for me to produce. The ones that are the monthly summary episodes where I read all the bills, even the boring ones, and I outline them all. And you know, those are a bitch to get through. And those are the ones that very few people contribute after. So as fun as these episodes, you know, about TPP and now about, you know, the USA Freedom Act, I'm sure a lot of people are going to contribute. At least, God, I hope so. I hope more people are going to chip in this month than last month, because it was a rough one. But it's just really funny to me that the ones that are the hardest for me are the ones that are kind of the least appreciated. And it doesn't surprise me. They're not as sexy. They're not as exciting, you know, but they're still really necessary to know what your Congress is doing. So I don't know. I just think that's funny. Okay, so that's it for this episode. Like I said, the next episode should be about the April bills. I don't know what's going to stop me from doing that one now. So, yeah, I hope you guys do great. Oh, one more thing to tell you. I found an apartment. So I can give you guys a timeline of when things are going to get a little weird for me. I'm going to be moving right after the 4th of July. And we're not going to Richmond, because Richmond was kind of out of the way, but also the building that I was looking at only had 87 apartments. So the likelihood of something that I wanted opening up was pretty slim. So Joe and I went last weekend to Walnut Creek, which is still on BART. It's a little bit more inland where the sun actually shines. And we found a wonderful apartment complex, 5 minutes walk for Joe to the public transportation system. His commute's going to be about the same as it would be if we moved to Richmond, like our last plan was. So we're really excited about it, and we're going to save a decent amount of cash on rent. And I am really excited because there's a bike path that goes through a bunch of different cities. I didn't even know this existed. It goes through a bunch of different cities here in the East Bay, and it's not a bike path that shares the road with cars. It's an actual path on an old railroad. And I had one of those when I was living in Boston. It's one of the things that kept me sane, because I would go every day and ride my bike for like, I don't know, 10 miles, whatever I felt like. And I never had to worry about cars. So that bit of happiness is coming back into my life in a place where it doesn't snow. So I'm actually really excited about this. The only thing that means is that I'm going to be moving again. So the production schedule of Congressional Dish might get a little funky towards the middle of July. For the next month, I really do have a lot going on. So please forgive me if the episodes are a little slow. Once I have help and once I fully move, hopefully I can churn more of these out. But like I said, the only thing I can promise you is that every month I will do a summary episode for what happened in Congress. And that's all I can promise at this point. So, and that will happen. I will get you those April bills as fast as I can, followed by the May bills. And if anything crazy happens, again, you know that I can't help myself. I'll stop whatever I'm doing and tell you about it. So that's it for today. Hope you guys are well, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye. Oh, and one more thing. I forgot. Daniel Wyndham sent me highlighters. So thank you, Daniel. I can never have enough. Okay, now I'm really done. Bye.
We're surrounded now by liars coming at us through our TV screens.
We don't have a domestic spying program.
They're content to fight in black and white despite the many in-betweens. We got a president who plays with the facts. And then he waits
The polar ice caps aren't going away.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it lies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. We are so damn tired of being lied to.
Government jobs consume the profits of the private sector.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. Now we're not keeping quiet.
These bills represent common sense, bipartisan solutions that actually solve problems.